Welcome, friends, to a fantastic science fiction story. In this episode, we'll be listening to the story of Owen and the alien queen Elena. If you're ready, let's dive into the science fiction universe together. Enjoy the show. No one wanted me to sit with them, but the alien queen took my hand and said, "Will you sit with me?" The invitation had arrived by mistake, and Owen knew it, and the station knew it, and possibly several nearby star systems knew it too. Somewhere in Elysium's administrative core, a filing intelligence had sneezed, and the name of a human cargo pilot had slipped from the delivery manifest onto the guest registry of the Centennial Concord banquet. Owen had considered, for nearly 4 seconds, doing the honorable thing and reporting the error. Then he had considered the free food won by a comfortable margin. So now he stood beneath the crystal domes of the Grand Hall, wearing a rented formal jacket that had been tailored, as far as he could tell, for a man with no shoulders and the torso of a hopeful child. Above him, artificial auroras rippled across the dome in curtains of violet and gold, projected there because Elysium orbited nothing that produced real ones. 100 worlds worth of diplomats drifted below that borrowed sky, and every single one of them had already decided that Owen did not exist. He had learned the hall's geography the way he learned any port, by being turned away from it. The Varian delegation occupied the eastern tables, tall and silver-scaled, their perfume so aggressive it qualified as a territorial claim. When Owen had approached with his tray of luminous appetizers and a hopeful expression, their ambassador had looked through him with such precision that Owen briefly checked whether he had become transparent. He rated it a solid 7 out of 10. Excellent technique, minimal effort. The Ashkari lords were less subtle. Four-armed, granite-skinned, they had physically rotated their chairs as he passed, all of them in unison like a flower of contempt blooming in reverse. 9 out of 10. He deducted a point only because one of them had rotated too far and knocked over his own drink. Even the serving drone had opinions. It hovered at his elbow for the 3rd time that evening, chiming pleasantly, its screen displaying a courteous map to the nearest exit. "I'm a guest," Owen told it. The drone flickered, consulted something, and enlarged the map. "You and me both, buddy," Owen muttered, and took 2 more appetizers out of spite. He retreated at last to the hall's edge, near a column of living coral imported from some ocean world whose name he couldn't pronounce, and ate standing up, the way cargo pilots always ate, the way people ate when no table in the room would have them. From here he could see the whole glittering machinery of the banquet, the fountains of liquid light, the choir of crystalline birds engineered to sing in 11-part harmony, the slow gravitational waltz of beings who commanded fleets and moons and treaties. And at the far end, raised on a dais of white stone, the Sylvane throne. He had not let himself look at it directly until now. Everyone knew of the Sylvane Empire the way everyone knew of black holes. Vast, ancient, and best admired from a distance. Their queen sat motionless, and even motionless she bent the room around her. Elena. Her skin was the green of deep jade held up to starlight, luminous without glowing, as though light simply preferred to stay near her. Her ears rose long and tapered from beneath a crown of woven silver, elegant as calligraphy. And they moved. That was the strange thing, the thing the news feeds never captured. They moved constantly, minutely, tilting and turning like instruments tuned to frequencies the rest of the hall was too loud to notice. Owen watched her for exactly as long as a cargo pilot could reasonably watch a queen, which was not long, and then devoted his attention to a dessert that appeared to be a small edible nebula. He was mid-bite when the music stopped. Not faded. Stopped. The crystalline birds fell silent mid-harmony. 1,000 conversations died in the same breath, and the silence that followed had texture, the specific silence of a hall in which something impossible had begun. Elena had risen from her throne. She descended the dais steps without hurry, and the crowd did not part for her so much as recoil, ambassadors folding backward like grass before weather. Her ears were angled forward now, both of them, fixed, aimed, and Owen, following their line with the dull arithmetic of a man triangulating a docking vector, arrived at the answer and rejected it immediately. He turned to check behind himself. There was only the coral column, which, whatever its virtues, seemed an unlikely candidate for royal attention. She crossed the entire hall, past the Varians, whose perfume seemed to falter, past the Ashkari, frozen mid-rotation. She stopped before Owen, close enough that he could hear a faint harmonic in the air around her, like a struck bell remembering its note, and she looked at him, not through him, the way the whole galaxy did, but at him as though he were the only clear signal in a hall full of noise. Then the queen of the Sylvane Empire extended her hand, palm open, and asked, in a voice pitched low and impossibly gentle, "Will you sit with me?" Somewhere behind them, an ambassador dropped an entire tray of edible nebulae. Owen heard each one bounce. Owen looked at the offered hand for what felt like a geological era. It was a good hand, as hands went, 6 fingers, emerald-skinned, faintly luminous at the fingertips, the kind of hand that signed treaties and dissolved parliaments. His own hand, by contrast, still held half an edible nebula, which was now melting through his fingers in a slow drizzle of sugared starlight. "I should mention," he said, "that I'm sticky." "But I have survived worse," said the queen of the Sylvane Empire, and her fingers closed around his. The walk back across the hall took 1,000 years. Owen was aware of every eye, every lens, every recording drone pivoting toward them with the hungry whir of machines that understood they were witnessing history. The Varian ambassador's mouth hung open far enough to be a navigational hazard. Somewhere in the crowd, a translator device could be heard repeating the phrase asterisk. This cannot be correct in 40 languages, apparently of its own volition. Elena seated him at her right hand, at the Sylvane table, on the dais. There was an actual cushion involved, and Owen sat on it the way a man sits on unexploded ordnance. The banquet resumed, in the sense that food continued to arrive, and beings continued to place it in their mouths, but nobody in that hall tasted anything for the rest of the evening. Conversations restarted in strangled whispers. And then, one by one, the great houses began to send their toasts. Because in galactic diplomacy, Owen was rapidly learning. A toast was simply an insult wearing formal clothing. The Varian ambassador rose first, goblet high, silver scales arranged into a smile. "To her radiance," he intoned, "whose famous compassion extends to even the smallest asterisk of creatures." "To compassion," Elena agreed pleasantly, lifting her glass. "A concept I am delighted the Varians have finally encountered, if only in a toast." She drank. The ambassador sat down as though his knees had been repossessed. An Ashkari lord tried next, all 4 arms spread in ceremonial grandeur. "May the queen's table always reflect the dignity of her empire." "It does tonight," said Elena, and something in the way she said it made 3 separate delegations decide not to attempt a toast at all. Owen, for his part, was fighting a war on 2 fronts: the political theater to his left and the cutlery in front of him, which consisted of 11 implements, 2 of which were gently vibrating, and 1 of which he was fairly sure had made eye contact. He selected the least ambitious fork and busied himself with a salad of blue leaves, and it was going well, genuinely well, right up until he reached for the elegant arrangement of crimson fronds in the table's center, and ate a generous portion of it. The choking sound from the eastern tables was immediate. A Varian attendant shot to his feet, trembling, pointing. "That," murmured Elena, leaning toward Owen with the serenity of a woman watching whether happened to someone else, was the ceremonial hat plant of the Varian ambassador. "It is 400 years old. It is worn at coronations." Owen looked down at the fronds in his hand. He looked at the ambassador, whose scales had achieved a shade of outrage previously unknown to science. He looked back at the plant. "It's very good," he said. "My compliments to whoever grows his hats." There was a sound then that no one in the hall had ever heard before, and it took the assembled diplomats of 100 worlds several seconds to identify it, because it was the queen of the Sylvane Empire laughing. Brief, low, quickly folded away, but real and witnessed, and instantly the most valuable piece of intelligence in the sector. It was in the quiet after the laugh that Owen noticed it properly. Her ears. Whenever he spoke, not when the ambassadors flattered, not when the choir sang, only when he spoke, they turned toward him. Both of them slightly, involuntarily, the way instruments turn toward a signal. It was such a small thing. It was the kind of small thing that made the hair on a pilot's neck stand up 3 seconds before an alarm went off. "You keep doing that," he said quietly. "Doing what?" "Listening to me like I'm saying something else." For one unguarded instant, something crossed her face, surprise or grief or recognition, arriving too fast to be sorted, and then the royal composure closed over it like water over a stone. It was the Chancellor who answered, in a way. Theodore, ancient and gray-green, his once-proud ears drooping like tired banners, had been stationed behind the throne all evening, radiating the professional despair of a man watching 6 centuries of protocol dissolve in real time. As he refilled the Queen's glass, he paused beside Owen and spoke without moving his lips, in the manner of all great servants and ventriloquists. "She has waited 600 years to hear that frequency again," he murmured. "Do try not to say anything stupid with it." Then he glided away, leaving Owen alone with 11 pieces of cutlery, 1 stolen hat, and the sudden, vertiginous suspicion that the Queen had not chosen his company at all. She had chosen his voice. The summons arrived at the hour when Elysium dimmed its corridors to imitate night, delivered by a Sylvan attendant who bowed to Owen so deeply that he checked over his shoulder again, out of habit. He had spent the hours since the banquet in his bunk in the cargo district, staring at the ceiling and explaining to himself, in increasingly firm tones, that queens did not send for pilots. Then the door had chimed and the attendant had said, "Her Radiance requests your voice," which was, Owen felt, an unsettling way to phrase absolutely anything. The Sylvan wing occupied Elysium's highest ring, and it was not decorated so much as grown. Owen stepped through the final door and into a garden with no floor. Silver moss climbed in weightless rivers through the open air, coiling around drifting stones, glowing faintly from within, and the gravity simply ended at the threshold like a rule that had been politely asked to leave. He drifted in with the practiced ease of a man who had spent 20 years in zero-G holds, which is to say he only hit 1 rock. Elena was waiting at the garden's heart, uncrowned, her silver circlet replaced by nothing at all, and somehow more royal for it. Her ears were relaxed for the first time since he'd seen her, half-lowered, at ease, the way a bird sits with folded wings. "You came," she said. "You sent an empire," said Owen. It seemed rude to decline. She gestured, and the moss obligingly braided itself into something chair-shaped beside her. He sat in it, or floated against it, and waited, because even a cargo pilot knew that queens unpacked their reasons in their own time. "What do you know," she asked at last, "of how the Sylvan hear?" "Rumors, bar stories," he shrugged. "They say you can hear a lie from orbit. The lie is the least of it." Her ears rose slowly, turning, and the whole garden seemed to quiet around their movement. Every soul resonates, Owen. Every living mind hums at a frequency all its own, beneath the voice, beneath the heartbeat. Humans cannot hear it. Most species cannot. We hear nothing else. When I stand in that banquet hall, I do not hear conversations. I hear 10,000 souls, all shouting, all discordant, all asterisk loud asterisk. She paused. It has been that way for 600 years. And then a cargo pilot argued with a serving drone, and I heard. She stopped. Owen watched her search for the word, and it occurred to him that he was watching a being who commanded fleets struggle to speak. "Silence," he offered. "Music," she said. The moss glowed gently between them. Somewhere below, Elysium turned through the dark. "There is a text," Elena continued, quieter now. older than my throne, older than the empire it built. It speaks of a voice pitched like a dying star, a resonance that appears once in an age, when the great song begins to fail. The text says this voice will either save the Sylvane or unmake us entirely. Her eyes found his. It is not ambiguous about there being no third option. Owen absorbed this with the expression of a man reading a repair bill. "Right," he said. "And you're sure, I want to be thorough here, you're sure the prophecy couldn't mean a different cargo pilot? There's a guy on the third ring, Daniel, terrific posture, very prophetic energy. Owen, because I haul frozen appetizers, your radiance. My greatest contribution to galactic history is that I once delivered 40 tons of soup without spilling it. Mostly, the soup arrived," said Elena, with the ghost of that banquet laugh, "and so did you. The song does not consult our preferences." Then the lightness left her, and what remained was older and lonelier than anything he'd ever seen wear a face. 600 years, Owen. I have listened to every voice in every hall on 100 worlds, waiting to hear it again and dreading that I would. And it arrived in a rented jacket, eating my rival's hat. "The hat was excellent," said Owen. "I stand by the hat." Her ears tilted toward him, that involuntary turn, and this time he understood it, and the understanding sat strangely warm in his chest, and neither of them said anything for a while, which the moss seemed to appreciate. Far below, in Elysium's underring, where the light stayed dim on purpose, a maintenance airlock cycled without authorization. 3 figures stepped through, silver-scaled beneath matte black shrouds, and the station's sensors developed a sudden, expensive blindness in their vicinity. The tallest of them consulted a device on which a single human biosignature pulsed like a target and spoke one word into the dark, in the elegant hiss of high Varian. The word did not translate kindly. Above, in the garden, Owen was asking whether prophecies came with any kind of stipend, and Elena was laughing for the second time in 600 years, and neither of them heard the future-changing shape beneath their feet, which was, all things considered, a remarkable thing to slip past the finest ears in the galaxy. The diplomatic recital was held 2 nights later in the Amber Rotunda, and Owen attended because Elena asked, and because Theodore had personally delivered a formal Sylvan robe, along with the observation that the rented jacket had died bravely and should be permitted to rest. The robe fit. This alarmed Owen more than anything else that week. Somewhere, an empire had his measurements. The recital itself was a Varian gesture of reconciliation, which should have been the first warning, since Varians reconciled the way glaciers apologized. A choir of silver-scaled singers stood in the rotunda's heart, producing harmonies so mathematically perfect that 3 delegates wept, and one attempted to propose marriage to a soprano. Between movements, servers moved through the audience with trays calibrated to each species, mineral wafers for the Ashkari, ionized mist for the Drell contingent, and on a single small plate that wound its way through the crowd like a patient rumor, something warm and golden and unmistakably human. Honey bread, real honey bread from real wheat at a station where Owen hadn't smelled either in 11 years. "They made this for me," he murmured, genuinely touched, lifting it toward his mouth. "See, people can change." Elena's hand closed on his wrist. She did it without turning, without rising, her eyes still politely on the choir, and her grip was gentle in the way that orbital clamps are gentle. Her ears had gone rigid, both of them, aimed down at the small golden slice, and Owen would remember for the rest of his life that the finest instruments in the galaxy had just been pointed at his snack. "The bread," she said conversationally, "is singing the wrong song. Bread sings. Everything sings. That," her chin tilted a quarter degree, "is singing in Varian, a protein melody written for exactly one species' heart." Her voice stayed level, pitched beneath the choir. "Yours." Owen looked at the bread. The bread sat there, golden and treacherous, radiating hospitality. "That's the nicest assassination anyone's ever attempted on me," he said faintly. They put asterisk honey on it. What happened next happened in under 4 seconds, and Owen spent much of it airborne. Elena rose, and the queen who commanded fleets was suddenly, visibly, a being who had once commanded them in person. She pivoted, her arm swept Owen bodily behind her, and the plate she flicked off his palm spun across the rotunda and landed in front of a Varian junior attaché, who looked at it, went the color of old chrome, and bolted, which, as confessions went, was reasonably comprehensive. 2 shrouded figures broke from the colonnade in the same instant, and light flowered from their hands. "Exits," said Elena. "Follow me," said Owen, and for the first time since the banquet he was the one who took her hand. He pulled her through a service hatch that no diplomat knew existed, into the veins of Elysium. The cargo corridors, the gravity sumps, the maintenance shafts where the station stopped pretending to be a palace and admitted to being a machine. Behind them, boots rang on deck plating. Ahead, Owen navigated by muscle memory, by 11 years of hauling freight through these exact arteries, calling turns before they arrived. Left, mind the coolant line. Duck no, asterisk your asterisk duck, you're taller there. He swung them into a junction where 4 conveyance tubes met, slapped a panel, and an entire wall of cargo pallets began rearranging itself with a groan, sealing the corridor behind them like a self-solving puzzle. From the far side came the muffled thud of an assassin meeting 40 tons of frozen appetizers. "That," Owen announced, catching his breath, "was the soup. Told you it arrived." Elena stared at him in the dim red service light, her ears swiveling, tracking the corridors around them, and something in her expression was doing arithmetic it had never done before. "You know this station better than its architects. Architects go home at night. Pilots get lost here for years." He shrugged, grinning despite everything, adrenaline making him honest. "Do you know how long I've waited for a room where I outrank everybody? Welcome to my empire, your radiance. Try the soup." They emerged, eventually, into the Sylvane wing through a maintenance door that Theodore was already holding open, wearing the expression of a chancellor who had aged a further century in one evening. Guards flooded past them. Somewhere alarms were teaching the station new songs. Elena stopped in the doorway. Then she turned, took Owen's hand deliberately, formally, in full view of her guards, her chancellor, and the recording drones already gathering like carrion birds, and spoke in the voice that treaties were made of. "Owen of Earth stands under the protection of the Sylvane throne. His blood is my blood. An attempt upon him is an attempt upon the empire." Theodore closed his eyes slowly, in the manner of a man watching a war being declared in the passive voice. "Well," said Owen into the silence, "there goes the neighborhood." The conquered tribunal convened 9 days later in the Hall of Accord, a chamber built in the shape of a perfect sphere, so that no delegation could claim to sit above another, which had merely inspired the great houses to invent 17 other ways of measuring altitude. 100 worlds sent their arbiters. They arrived in ships like cathedrals, docked in order of ancient precedence, and filed into the sphere along gravity rails, and every single one of them had come to answer the same question. What was to be done about the human? Owen sat in the accused's cradle at the sphere's center, not accused of anything, technically, as Theodore had spent 3 days pointing out, but the conquered had dusted off a procedural relic called an inquiry of standing, which allowed the houses to put an asterisk situation on trial when they could not decently put a person. The situation was Owen. The cradle rotated slowly, presenting him to each delegation in turn, and Owen passed the opening ceremonies by counting how many arbiters refused to look at him. He got to 40 before the Varians rose. Their advocate was magnificent, all silver filigree and grief, and she mourned. She mourned the broken banquet protocols. She mourned the injured assassins, alleged asterisk recreationalists, she said, who had been enjoying the maintenance corridors when they were ambushed by frozen soup. Above all, she mourned the ancient dignity of the Sylvan crown, dragged into scandal by, and here she produced the phrase like a dueling glove. A provisional species. Point of clarification, said Theodore, rising with the weaponized mildness that Owen had come to recognize as the Chancellor going to battle stations. Under Concord Codex 9, the term provisional species was formally retired 4 centuries ago. In a motion drafted, I note with delight, by the Varian delegation, who required it retired before their own elevation could proceed. He produced a document. He had an apparently bottomless supply of documents, and each one detonated on arrival. I have brought copies. The footnotes are exquisite. Footnote 12 alone has ended 2 careers. The sphere rippled with the sound of 100 worlds attempting not to laugh, which is a real sound, and one of the great underrated forces in galactic politics. But the houses had numbers, and grievances stacked over centuries like sediment, and the tide of the session bent slowly against the throne. Treaty clauses were invoked, precedents were exhumed and made to dance. An Ashkari elder spoke for an hour about the sanctity of separation between the great bloodlines and the freight species, and by the recess, the arithmetic was plain on Theodore's face. They had the law, and the houses had the votes. Then they called Owen to testify, expecting a target. He rose in the cradle, cleared his throat, and discovered that 11 years of hauling cargo had left him with exactly one form of eloquence. The manifest. I don't know anything about prophecy, he said, so I'll tell you what I do know. Birth records, 11 years, 409 runs. He recited them the way other men recited poetry. Grain to Teshin for the famine year, when the relief contract paid so badly that every registered guild ship declined it. I flew it anyway. Twice. Medical coolant to the Drell hatcheries during the plague season, your delegation's hatcheries, honored arbiter, 3rd ring, I remember the docking code. Water purifiers to Meridian after the tremors. Soup on one occasion to a banquet where nobody wanted me. He looked slowly around the sphere at the worlds arrayed above him. I've been to your planets, not the palaces, the ports. I've carried what your people needed to stay alive, and I never once checked what species they were before I undocked. You're deciding tonight whether someone like me can sit at a table. He shrugged. I just thought you should know I've been setting your tables for years. No votes moved. Owen could see that. The arithmetic sat in the sphere unchanged, cold as vacuum. But something else moved, a silence with a different texture than before, and in the Drell delegation, an arbiter looked at the docking code Owen had recited and did not look away. The Varian advocate rose to call the final vote, and that was when Elena stood. She had said almost nothing for 9 days. Now she descended to the sphere's center, and her voice, when it came, was pitched to carry into every treaty archive in the galaxy. The houses questioned my judgment. Very well, I invoke the right of resonance. The sphere detonated into uproar. Theodore made a small sound like a man swallowing a century. Even the Varian advocate stepped backward, filigree trembling. Because the right was older than the conquered itself and could not be refused, appealed, or survived politically. The prophecy would be tested in public before every gathered world, with the Sylvane crown itself as the stake. If Owen's soul sang true, no house could touch him. If it did not, Elena's reign ended where it stood. Your radiance, Owen said quietly, as the sphere raged around them. What exactly did you just bet? Everything, said Elena, and her ears were turned toward him, steady as compass needles. Try to be in tune. The resonance chamber lay at the heart of the Sylvane flagship Verdant Him *, a vessel so old that its hull had opinions, and the chamber itself predated the ship the way a seed predates a forest. The ship had been built around it, and the ship before that, and the ship before that, all the way back to whatever ancient world had first carved the thing. It was a sphere of black stone veined with threads of light, and it had no instruments, no mechanisms, no controls. It did not need them. It was, Theodore explained as they descended, an ear. The chamber listens, he said. It takes the frequency of a soul and sings it aloud, amplified, unfiltered to everyone within range. And tonight, everyone within range. He gestured wearily upward at the 100 delegations packed into the observation galleries, at the fleet of witness ships hanging off the hull, at the relay drones broadcasting to the conquered entire. Is everyone. So it's karaoke, said Owen. Mandatory galactic soul karaoke. I am going to pretend, for the remainder of my life, that you did not say that within hearing of the chamber. At the threshold Theodore stopped, and his drooping ears lifted with visible effort, and he did something he had never done. He bowed to Owen, not deeply, but truly. 600 years ago, he said quietly, I stood here when the last voice was tested and failed, and I watched what the failing cost her. Whatever you are, pilot, be it loudly. And he withdrew. Inside, the chamber was warm and utterly silent, and Elena stood at its center wearing white, uncrowned again, and Owen understood with a lurch that queens did not dress simply for ceremonies. They dressed simply for verdicts. Before it begins, she said, you should know what it costs. The chamber does not sing your voice, Owen. It sings you, everything beneath the voice. Every fear, every grief, every small hidden room. 100 worlds will hear it, and you cannot choose what they hear. And if I'm out of tune, then the prophecy dies, and my crown with it, and they will be merciful to neither of us. She said it without weight, the way pilots read out hull breaches. Then softer, you can still refuse, I would not. 600 years ago, Owen interrupted. The last voice, Theodore said it failed her asterisk. Not the empire, her. He watched her stillness confirm it. You've done this before. You stood in this room and hoped, and the chamber said no, and you've been listening to 10,000 souls shouting ever since, alone, waiting to try again. He exhaled. That's the part the prophecy never wrote down, isn't it? What the listening costs the listener. Her composure didn't break. It simply set something down, some weight carried so long it had become posture. Every voice in every hall, she said. For 6 centuries. Do you know what it is, Owen, to hear everyone and be heard by no one? Yeah, said Owen, thinking of 100 banquet tables turning away. Smaller scale, same physics. The chamber began without warning because ears do not count down. The veins of light brightened, the black stone drank the silence, and Owen felt it reach into him, not painfully but thoroughly the way depressurization is thorough. And then the verdant hymn asterisk, the galleries, the witness fleet, the relays, the conquered, and 100 watching worlds heard the soul of a human cargo pilot sung aloud. It was not thunder. Every house had braced for thunder, for a weapon, for a dying star's scream. What emerged instead was almost embarrassing in its smallness. A single steady note, unglamorous, unwavering, the sound of a man who kept flying famine routes nobody paid for, who ate standing up for 11 years and stayed kind anyway, who was never once expected and always arrived. A frequency like a load-bearing wall. And the galleries were still deciding what to feel about it when the chamber did the thing that no text had foretold, because the ancient writers had gotten the prophecy exactly half right. It reached for Elena's frequency too, unbidden. 600 years of listening rendered as a vast, aching, searching chord, and laid the 2 songs together. They did not compete. They did not even harmonize quite. They completed, each one supplying the intervals the other had been missing for centuries, the pilot's steadiness giving the queen searching somewhere to land, her depth giving his plain note resonance it had never owned alone, and the combined sound rolled out through the relays into 100 parliaments and brought several of them, involuntarily, to their feet. The prophecy had never promised a savior. It had promised a asterisk counterpart asterisk. The voice would save the Sylvane or unmake them, and now everyone understood the mechanism. It would unmake only what refused to hear it. In the chamber, in the middle of the music that was both of them, Elena laughed 3rd time in 6 centuries, and Owen was reaching for her hand when the verdant hymn shuddered from bow to stern, and the ancient hull spoke a word it had not needed in 1,000 years, in klaxons, in every corridor at once. The Varians had heard the verdict. They had opened fire on it. The battle above Elysium would fill archives, and none of them would understand it, because archives record fleets, and fleets were not what decided it. What the historians would agree on was this. House Varian struck first and struck brilliantly, and their opening salvo did not target the verdant him at all. It targeted the supply lanes. Every fuel tender, every munitions barge, every relief corridor between the Sylvan fleet and its lifelines, mined, severed, sealed. The Varians had watched 6 centuries of Sylvan warfare and learned that you could not outfight the Queen's captains. So they would starve them instead, politely, at range, while half the conquered's houses hung back in the dark deciding which victor to congratulate. On the verdant him s bridge, admirals painted the truth across the tactical sphere in bleeding vectors. 4 hours of fuel, corridors gone, relief impossible. Any ship large enough to break the blockade would be seen and killed. Anything small enough to slip it could carry nothing worth carrying. It was, one admiral said, a lock with no key. Owen, standing at the sphere's edge in a borrowed robe, cleared his throat with the particular timbre of a man about to say something no one wanted to hear, and every long ear on the bridge turned toward him at once, which he still found unfair. "It's not a lock," he said. "It's a docking queue, and you're all reading it like warriors." He reached into the sphere and traced a line no tactician had drawn because no tactician would. Through the debris of the mined corridors, through the Varian formation's own supply train, through gaps that existed only in the seconds between patrol rotations. Warships can't fly this. Too big, too proud, and your pilots bank like they're being graded. But a hauler flies ugly. A hauler flies apologetically asterisk. I've threaded worse than this with 40 tons of soup, and gentlemen, nobody ever shoots at freight. It offends the accountants. "You are describing," said the admiral slowly, "an unarmed cargo run through an active battlefield." "I'm describing a Tuesday," said Owen. Elena looked at him across the sphere, and whatever passed between them had no protocol. "The prophecy said you would save us or unmake us," she said. "I had hoped for a method involving fewer of your organs." "Steady note," Owen said, tapping his own chest. "Load-bearing, you heard the song." They gave him the *s oldest tender, a blunt utilitarian brick that the deck crews had nicknamed the brave potato asterisk, and he flew it the way he had flown for 11 invisible years, unglamorously, apologetically, hugging debris, drifting dead through sensor windows, once spending 4 full minutes disguised as wreckage, while a Varian destroyer slid past close enough to read its hull plating. He talked the whole way, because the comm was open to the bridge, and because Elena's ears were on the other end of it, and later, whole doctoral theses would be written on the transcript. A man narrating the most consequential flight in conquered history in the tone of a grocery delivery. Left at the minefield, mined the coolant, their duck, not mine. He did not break the blockade with weapons. He broke it by docking. The brave potato slid into the automated receiving bay of the Varian supply flagship, because freight offends no accountants, and their systems welcomed him. And Owen jettisoned his entire cargo into their master intake. 40 tons of magnetized hull sealant, the humble paste that patched every dent in the galaxy, which set inside the Varian fleet's fuel distribution network like plaque in an artery. No explosions, no casualties. One by one, across the dark, the blockade's warships simply, gently, embarrassingly stopped, becalmed. Engines starved. The mightiest ambush in a century defeated by building materials. While the relief corridor swung open behind them and the watching houses, reading the new arithmetic, remembered urgently that they had always adored the Queen. The Varian surrender was signed within a week. Footnote 12, deployed at last by Theodore with unconcealed joy, did the rest. The banquet hall was rebuilt by autumn, the same crystal dome, the same borrowed auroras, the same long tables. When Owen entered, the hall did not fall silent. It rose. The Ashkari lords rotated their chairs toward him, in unison, which was somehow more unnerving. The Drell arbiter stood and touched the docking code embroidered new on his sash. The Varian delegation offered him, with rigid ceremony, a hat plan of his own, 400 years old, and he was fairly sure it was an apology and absolutely sure he would eat it later. Every table in the galaxy wanted him now, and Owen walked past all of them, past the ambassadors, the admirals, the historians already getting it wrong, to the small table at the hall's edge, near a column of living coral, where a queen sat waiting with 2 chairs and no crown, her long ears already turned toward his footsteps, hearing the one frequency in 10,000 that had ever sounded like quiet. He held out his hand, palm open, sticky with dessert, steady as a load-bearing wall. "Will you sit with me?" She did. They say the great song of the galaxy has 10,000 voices, and that most of us spend our whole lives shouting into it, hoping to be heard above the noise. But this story was never about being loud. It was about a man who ate standing up for 11 years and stayed kind anyway, and a queen who could hear everyone and was heard by no one. 2 frequencies the universe had written for each other, waiting in the dark for a single question to bring them into the same room. Because here is the thing the prophecy understood, and the great houses never did. The galaxy is not changed by thrones or fleets or footnotes. It is changed by the small, terrifying act of crossing a crowded room. Everything that followed, the trial, the song, the war, the peace, began with one hand extended toward a person everyone else had decided not to see. So the story leaves you with the questions it leaves every hall it passes through. Who is standing at the edge of your banquet, eating alone beside the coral column, rated and rejected and still showing up? How many times have you turned your chair, not cruelly perhaps, just carefully, just in unison with everyone else? And who, in the noise of your own 10,000 voices, has been listening for you all along, waiting 600 years, or maybe just 6 ordinary days, for you to say something true in your own frequency? Perhaps the bravest thing in any world, this one included, is not saving an empire. Perhaps it is simpler and harder than that. To see the person no one sees, to cross the floor while everyone watches, to hold out your hand, sticky, imperfect, unmistakably yours, and ask the question that unmakes loneliness in every language ever spoken. Will you sit with me? Someone near you is waiting to be asked. Someone near you is waiting to ask. The song only needs one of you to move first. Our story ends here, friends. Before we go, I have a small request for you. Please don't forget to hit the like button, leave your thoughts about the story in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel for more stories. See you in the next Sci-Fi Traveler story.